going to make a creamy andouille and potato soup with some cranberry orange muffins. So let's start by dicing up our onions to start caramelizing for our soup. And then we'll work on our muffins and all that jazz. So I'm going to kind of peel off the full kind of outer bit of our onion here. And we are not going to be pureeing the soup at all. It's going to be kind of a nice kind of chunky, creamy potato stew. So I'm going to do a slightly smaller dice on the onions so I don't get huge chunks in there. And then we'll warm up about a tablespoon of olive oil to saute our onions in. It's just a good amount to kind of cover the bottom of your Dutch oven here. I'm going to turn my heat over. I'm going to start with like a medium high of around like a 6 to a 7 on my stove. We're going to pop our onions in here. And then I think I will prep up my garlic and we'll cut up a couple vegetables. We're not going to add them in because the onions take a good while to cook, but that way when we're ready to kind of pop them in, we'll have some of the next steps done. So I'm going to do a good amount of garlic, that way we have that lovely flavor in here. So this will be about a tablespoon of minced up garlic when we get it all minced up. And once our onions have nicely caramelized, we'll throw this garlic in for about a minute before we add in the celery and then the carrots. And then last the potatoes. And we'll have a little bit of cheese in our soup as well, so it'll kind of be this nice cheesy andouille potato and soup. Just nice, kind of perfect for the cold weather. So we'll have our garlic right there, and then I've got 3 pretty good stalks of celery here. So I'm going to kind of cut them down so that I'll have smaller pieces on it, and then we'll dice them up. These are pretty large, so the larger parts, I'm going to just cut them smaller, but if you have smaller stalks, you can just have them. And these are going to give just really lovely flavor to the base of our stew. We're also going to be adding in a carrot, red bell pepper, and some Yukon Gold potatoes. Give my hands a quick rinse, then we'll stir our onions in that oil. We'll work on our next step, making our muffins. So I'm going to kind of coat all of those onions up in that olive oil.
Yo has a question for you.
What is for dinner tonight? I actually have an idea because I have a couple steaks that I didn't use up, and I need to use them up, especially because we'll have steak dinner later this week for my husband's birthday. But I think I'm going to do a steak and pasta. So a creamy pasta with steak in it. That's kind of my idea because we have kind of a quick turnaround between sports today, so I want kind of one of those meals that are quicker to get through on there. All right, let's start out making our muffins here. We're going to do a cranberry orange muffin. We are going to start with a 1/2 cup of our sourdough discard. So I fed up my sourdough, my starter this morning, so that I could have some fresh bread tomorrow. So we'll whip up some loaves later today and probably shape them up tonight. But I saved some of my starter for cooking. So a 1/2 cup of our starter or of our discard. We're gonna add in a 1/2 cup of melted butter. And then 3/4 of a cup of sour cream. We're gonna mix all of our wet ingredients together until we have kind of the base for it. So I'm just gonna kind of eyeball eyeball my sour cream, which I think is literally going to be the rest of this tub. And so my onions are sizzling fairly good over here. I'm gonna turn them down to about a 4. Give them a good stir around. Okay. And then I'm gonna mix our butter, our discard, our sour cream together. Then we'll add in 1/4 cup of heavy cream and our 2 eggs. And we're gonna get some orange zest in here, cinnamon, vanilla, a little bit of salt. Here. But I always just like to give this a good little mix. That way we can kind of get any of those clumps of that sour cream out. We need 1/4 cup of our cream. Now we'll use a little bit of cream later to brush over the top of our muffins, but just 1/4 is going to go in here. A teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then I'm going to get my little cheese grater over here, my small one, because this is the best zester. And while I don't actually have oranges, I have like clementines. They work great for you doing like a cranberry orange things. So we're gonna zest these guys up. So 2 of these guys are gonna equal about, 1 orange. You want about a tablespoon of orange zest in here. And then we'll use the juice to make a lovely orange glaze to go on top, little seed, on top of our muffins. That gives you a bit more orange flavor because the zest gives you a little bit of orange, but most of it comes in that glaze. We'll get these guys nice. I love the Parmesan cheese grater because it really does grate it up so nicely. Gives you nice little small pieces. And I find that the mandarin orange, they're like, got a very fragrant on there. I think I might need 1 more, so I'm gonna just grab 1 more out. Give it a difference. There we go. There. I wanna get what I visually looks like a tablespoon. It's always, I don't want to undercut it because then you won't get a lot of that orange flavor. You can always add it a bit more for stronger flavor, but I think there we go. And you can't zest them 2 things because they do have more of this delicate skin on them. Okay, let's get this. Let's get a spoon and we're going to mix these guys up. So we've got our cream in there, our vanilla, our orange zest. Give this a good mix around. And then we're gonna add in a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. A 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. And then 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And then we'll add in our eggs. we need 2 eggs. So 1, 2, and you know what, before we mix that in, we're gonna add in a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon as well. That way I can be done with the spices. So a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. It gives it a little bit of that kind of Christmassy vibe to it, without kind of overpowering either the cranberry or the orange. Just a little bit of cinnamon goes a long way. And then we're gonna mix this until it's all incorporated. You wanna make sure this is your good mixing time. We'll add our sugar in, but once we get to the flour, you don't wanna overmix or you're gonna have a stiffer muffin. Okay, looks like it. It's already gotten nice and kind of fluffier with the baking powder and baking soda kind of reacting with that discard and the sour cream. So it's kind of already a nice fluffy base to it. Now we're gonna add in our sugar. We're gonna add in 1 cup of granulated sugar. So we're gonna use white sugar for this muffin because again, it is kind of a lighter base. And it tends to work a little bit better than with using a brown sugar. And we will use about a teaspoon and a half more to sprinkle over the tops of our muffins to break, just to give them a little bit of a sweet top to them. So we'll mix our sugar in. And then we'll add in 2 cups of flour. And we'll just mix them until they're just incorporated, and then we'll fold in our fresh cranberries. Now, if you wanted to use dried cranberries, you can. You're just gonna wanna soak your dried cranberries for about 10 minutes, either in like orange juice, Sprite, or water, so that they kind of soften up. We're gonna add in our 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And then again, just mix until it is just incorporated. You don't want to over mix or you're going to, again, make your muffin stiff instead of nice and soft and fluffy. And so you're just gonna mix until all of the kind of powdery whiteness from the flour is gone, but your batter should still be thick and lumpy. And I like to use just a spoon for this instead of a hand mixer because I find it's really easy to over mix with a hand mixer. Okay, that looks pretty good. There's just scoop down underneath, make sure there's no more powder. And then we're gonna add in our cranberries. You're gonna wanna use between a cup and a cup and a half of cranberries for this. And you wanna use fresh, or if you're gonna use the dried cranberries, just again, soak them for about 10 minutes. And then we're just gonna fold these in, which is essentially scooping up from the bottom, and you're kind of folding that batter, that dough around what you're mixing in. It's just a more gentle way to mix in your ingredients so that you don't over mix. Here, and we should be pretty good. Perfect. So there is our mixture. Let's grab my muffin tin. I do have my oven preheated to 400 degrees. And these are just gonna cook for 18 minutes at 400. Give my onions a little bit of a stir now. They're starting to get a nice kind of golden brown color to it. Ooh, good catch. We're gonna put in our muffin tins, our muffin wrappers. And then we're gonna fill these guys up to the top because I like to have that nice big bakery dome on my muffins. you grab a nice metal spoon. It's a little bit easier to fill up. But we'll first go over with just a big spoonful in each one, and then we'll kind of finish, you know, top them off so they're all even. This dough is thick because it is a butter-based, you know, batter. But once it starts to heat up, it will just melt down, and then it will form that lovely dome on it. So don't worry if you, when you overfill it, that it kind of domes up over the top. You don't have to worry about it running over the like edge of your muffin pan. That's one thing that's kind of nice about using the butter. I love butter in my baked goods over oil because that flavor, you just can't beat the flavor of butter in baked goods. It gives it a, you know, a little bit richer and denser texture to it. Oil will give you a lighter, fluffier base to it, but that flavor is just so good. And then I'm going to go back over and then just equally fill them all out. And I find it's just easier to give like a big scoop in each one and then to fill them out. That way you don't overfill and then have to kind of partition off at the end. Let's see. I'm trying to make sure my cranberries get evenly spaced out. You don't want to have one that's overloaded and then another one that has none in it. Now you can always add, you know, I always say between a cup and a half of the cranberries. I wouldn't go over that, or you're gonna get more of a soggy muffin. And if you go less than a cup, you're just not gonna get enough cranberries in every bite. Now if you're gonna use dried, you're gonna use about a cup, and then you're gonna soak them to get you a little bit closer to a cup and a half because they'll expand with that liquid in there. Just got a little bit more that I can top these off with, and then we will brush the top with a little bit of cream and sprinkle a bit of sugar over it, and then they'll be ready to bake up. Wash my hands. Now you need hardly any cream to brush over the tops of these, just about, you know, less than a tablespoon. You just need enough to really dab it on the top. It will help give it a nice kind of golden brown color to it, especially since this is a little bit more of a blonde batter. We do have some cinnamon in here, which will give it a little bit of coloring, but with just the regular sugar in it, the granulated sugar, it's a paler muffin. So this will help give it a nice kind of golden brown top to it. And then we'll sprinkle just a little bit of sugar over it, which just gives you a slightly sweeter top on it as well. Okay. Looks good. Again, you can see I hardly used any of the cream that I put in there. You just need that little dabby dab. And then we're just gonna go over and we're gonna sprinkle just a little bit over the top of each one. We're gonna probably use, you know, about a teaspoon and a half of sugar max. It's just a small amount. And it gives you just this little extra bit of sweetness that does wonders on it. So if you don't like glaze, you can just eat it straight as for it. Okay, let's go pop these in the oven. These are going to bake at 400 degrees for 18 minutes. If you wanted to do a streusel topping on there, it would just take a little bit longer for it. But I opted for the orange glaze today because I thought it would be delicious. I'm gonna pop them in here. I'm gonna set my timer for 18 minutes. And let's go work on our soup, and then we'll make our lovely orange glaze. But our onions have caramelized up nicely. They've got a nice kind of golden brown color to them. So I'm gonna give them a good stir around. Then we're gonna add in our garlic. We'll let that saute up for just about a minute or so. Let it bring out those flavors before we add our celery in. So we're gonna mix that around and we'll let that saute. We'll get our celery in there in just a second. I've got one giant carrot, so this is probably equal to 2 or 3 of the smaller carrots. I'm going to peel it, and then we'll probably cut it into 6 because this is too big, even just for a quartered carrot. Because you don't want your pieces so big that it takes a really long time for it to cook up. We'll cut off the top and the bottom here. And then we're gonna dice them up. That way we have nice small bits of carrot that will add just a nice little bit of flavor to the broth. Won't be too overpowering, but will be absolutely lovely in there. And a little pop of orange. We'll have our red bell pepper that will give us a nice pop of red in here, and then the celery with the green. So you'll get a little bit of color in there to kind of break up the monotony of the potatoes. And this smaller part I'm just gonna cut into 4ths because it's a little bit thinner. Give our garlic another little stir. And now that we're about to add our celery and our carrots in, I'm going to turn up my heat from a 4 to about a 6, since these are kind of cold vegetables, and that will bring the temperature of the pan down. We're going to add them both in. We'll let them saute. Mix it all around, kind of coat them with that residual oil in there. And then we're gonna prep up our potatoes, because we'll put our potatoes in and then last our bell pepper. So I've got several kind of Yukon Gold potatoes here, as well as some baby golds. On here, so it's about 5 Yukon Gold potatoes. We'll see if we'll get to all of it or not. With the Yukon Gold, you can leave the skin on. It's a very tender, delicate skin, so you don't need to peel them. Just give them a really good wash, and then just kind of pat them dry. And we're gonna kind of cut them up smaller, so you just have some, little bits of potato in every bite. The nice thing about a Yukon Gold is they are going to keep their shape in this stew versus a russet. A russet is a bit more of a, I will say, it kind of disintegrates when you cook it. It's great for mashed potatoes, but it doesn't really hold up well in stews and soups. So this one will really keep it shape. Now, if you're gonna make a potato soup where you are going to puree it, then yes, russets are lovely for that, because they're not as kind of starchy and thick as a Yukon. But for this, since we want them to hold their shape, we're going to use our Yukons. And again, I'm going to just dice them up fairly small so that when you're eating your soup, you're going to be able to get everything in a lovely bite. And it's going to allow it to cook up a lot faster. If you cut your potatoes bigger, your soup is going to have to cook longer. Let's give this a little stir. We'll get these last ones. I always have like random bits of potatoes left over, and so I'm like, oh, I can finally use these 5 baby potatoes, and I'm like, why didn't I use them for something? Could have cooked them all up. It's just 5, but no, gotta save them. but it works. It's kind of nice. The weather is cold, and when it's cold, I feel like a lot of my kids are like, it's soup season, we need to have lots of soups. And I'm like, yes, we do. I love soup. I could eat it every single day. But I feel like they only really like it when it gets really cold. Okay. We're gonna add our potatoes in here, and we'll let those saute up while we prep our bell pepper, and then we're gonna get our spices in here and pour in a little bit put in a little bit of flour, and then our broth to start simmering. And then we'll grate some cheese, go in here as well. And of course, our andouille sausage. I'm just gonna kind of coat it around.
You have a question? Will you use chicken or beef broth?
I will use chicken broth for this. I'm using a sausage. I'm not sure whether, I'm pretty sure it's just a pork sausage. But I find, yeah, it's pork. But I find beef broth has a pretty strong flavor, so unless I'm making like a beef stew or something that has beef in it, I don't often use beef broth because its flavor is pretty distinctive. So you could use either chicken broth or chicken bouillon, or you could use vegetable bouillon. Both work really well for this. Let's get our bell pepper up there. We're gonna take out the seeds, kind of de-beard it a little bit. And then I find if you cut your pepper from the inside versus the outside where that slick skin is, the inside has grit. It will give you a better grip on your knife, so it's a little bit easier to cut. I find that bell peppers, onions, tomatoes, those are your slippery vegetables. And if your knife is dull, that is when they will slip and more likely to cut yourself. So cutting on the inside just gives you a little bit of grip, has a little bit of texture, is a little bit easier to cut. I'm gonna kind of dice these up. Think of, you know, a little bit bigger than salsa dicing. And we'll throw them in here. You could use a green bell pepper or some sweet peppers. If you want a little kick, you could probably even throw in a jalapeno. I like just the red bell pepper. It's a little less bitter than the green bell peppers, and we'll add a nice pop of red into our soup. Overboard. I'm going to say that celery and the garlic is just smelling wonderful right now. Okay, we're going to add in some spices. We'll throw our bell peppers in here. We'll add in some spices and then a little bit of flour. So let's get these guys in here. Do a nice little mix around. Okay. So we're gonna have kind of a good collection of spices here. We're gonna put in some onion powder. We're gonna do about, I'm gonna do about a half a tablespoon, so a couple good shakes. We're gonna do 2 bay leaves. About half a teaspoon of dried thyme. We're gonna do a smidge of cayenne pepper, and you could do more if you like it. It's got heat. I don't want it too hot, but I want about, you know, a little less than 1/4 of a teaspoon is about all I can handle in here. But again, you can add more if you can handle more. We're gonna add in some black pepper, about a half a teaspoon. I'm gonna add in, I want about a tablespoon of paprika, and I think this is about a tablespoon left. You can use regular or smoked. Smoked will give you a little bit more smoky flavor, which will go great with your andouille sausage because that is typically smoked, so it has a nice kind of that flavor to it. We're gonna add in a little bit of cumin. This is gonna give it a nice little earthy flavor to it. We're gonna use about a teaspoon of it. And we're gonna add in some Italian seasoning, about a teaspoon of Italian seasoning. If you don't have Italian seasoning, add in about a half a teaspoon of basil, half a teaspoon of oregano. And we're gonna kind of coat up all of our vegetables with this. And just let them kind of hit a little bit of that heat. That way they'll get their spices, their flavors will pop out a little bit more.
You have a question? Are dry herbs stronger than fresh?
It can depend on the herb, which ones they are. I find that a lot of them are because when you dry them, they shrink in volume. And so when they shrink in volume, that means you're getting more per amount versus the fresh one. Now, there are some fresh herbs that just don't equate to the dry ones, like cilantro and coriander. They taste very different, fresh or dry. And the same thing like basil and things, but most of the time dried is a little bit stronger than fresh. Now, always make sure your herbs, your dried herbs or spices are fresh because they do dull out with time and they get less flavorful. I'm gonna grab a little bit of flour here and we're gonna sprinkle this over our potatoes and make sure this is gonna help thicken up our stew a little bit.
Marianne sent you a gift.
Thank you, Marianne. We appreciate that. We're gonna use about a tablespoon or so. We'll sprinkle it over, we'll kind of stir it up, and then I might add a little bit more in here, but I like to just do about a tablespoon at a time to kind of coat it up. And overboard. I think we'll use about a half a tablespoon more. I don't want it to be super thick because we are going to be adding in a little bit of shredded cheese to it, so that will add in some thickness as well. And we'll also add in a little bit of cream to give it that nice creamy potato. But this helps thicken up that broth just a little bit. Now, if you need to go like completely like gluten-free, what you can do is just don't add the flour in, but when you're ready, after you've added the broth and you've simmered, take out about a half a cup and mix it with about a tablespoon of cornstarch to make a slurry and put it back in your soup to thicken it up. Okay, now that we've got these kind of toasted up, we're gonna add in our water with our bouillon. You can also use chicken broth. I prefer bouillon because I can use a little bit more to get a bit more flavor with less liquid. We're gonna start by adding in about 1 cup of water. And then you're gonna go around and just kind of really scrape the bottom of your pan, bring up those spices, any of those tasty herbs and bits that have stuck to the bottom. And we'll kind of mix this and incorporate it. You're gonna just have a really kind of thick paste now, but once we add more broth, we'll get more base to it. We'll add another cup. And I always like to go little by little instead of just kind of drenching it all in there at one time. That way, with stews like this, I know I don't pour in too much in case I need less than 4 cups. Another cup, but I think 4 cups will be perfect because I want just kind of enough to really cover over the top of my vegetables here. Perfect. And then I'm going to turn up We'll add a nice big scoop of our chicken bouillon in here and let it simmer for a little bit, and we gotta grate up some cheese, slice up our andouille sausage, which is already pre-cooked, and have it in there. Nice flavor. So I'm gonna do a big kind of heaping spoonful of my chicken bouillon. This is gonna add the saltiness to our soup, so we won't need to add any extra salt. Plus, we're gonna have the addition of the cheese, which also adds a little bit of saltiness. So give it a good mix around. Let's see, I'm gonna taste it, see if I've got my spices where I want them, knowing that they're gonna be dulled out a little bit with the cheese and the cream that we add in here. Good, perfect. Okay, let's get some of our cheese grated up. We're gonna put in about a cup of cheese in here to go in our soup. I don't think we'll need a whole lot for this. Freshly grated works best because it's going to melt better than pre-shredded, because pre-shredding has like an anti-caking agent, which means that there's like a powder on it that prevents it from sticking together during like the transport. So if you can, always use the shred your own. You can also rinse pre-shredded cheese under cold water to get some of that that powder off of it. But I find, you know, a block of cheese is actually cheaper than a bag of pre-shredded, so you save yourself money doing it. And then you gotta pay the cameraman his fee, his cheese tax. So we've got our cheese there ready. Get our andouille, so we're just doing a smoke. This is pecan smoke, so it's bougie. But again, it's already pre-cooked. This will add a nice smoky flavor to it. You could have added it in when we sauteed up the vegetables and everything, but I like to add it in towards the end where we heat it up so it doesn't lose out a lot of its flavor in the broth. So you're kind of eating it pretty close to putting it in there. So I'm just gonna cut off the very tips because those where they kind of twist and seal the sausage off is never good. And then for a more bougie cut, instead of cutting it like flat, like a straight up circle, if you cut it at a little bit of an angle, you're going to have just a nicer kind of cut to it. But our muffins are ready to come out. So let me wash my hands and we'll go grab those. Let those sit, and we're going to whip up an orange glaze for them. And then finish up our soup here. We'll do half and half. So look at those, are gorgeous. You can see the pops of the cranberry coming out from there. Beautiful. That nice tall bakery dome on it. Just wonderful. These again are cranberry orange muffins with our sourdough discard in it. So they're a great way to use up some of your sourdough mix, but also they keep the muffins from being so moist and tender as well. And the lovely pops of the fresh cranberry. So if you have leftover cranberries from Thanksgiving that you're like, I'm gonna make cranberry sauce, and you didn't, you can use them in the muffins because they're perfect for that. Okay, let's finish up slicing up our sausage here. Then we will toss that in there to kind of cook towards the very end. And we'll add our cheese in towards the very end. We'll slice up some green onions, add a little bit of cream, and we've got to make our orange glaze. So just a few more things left. Now the nice thing about I like to, always saute up my vegetables in my soup. It kind of cuts your cooking time down in half because sauteing them in the pan starts that cooking process, gives them more intense heat up versus the more mellow kind of heat from cooking in the Dutch oven. So It's a quicker way to make a soup pretty quickly. Get these last little bits. But I will say, I mean, this is just a pound of andouille sausage, but when you make it into a soup, it goes a long way. There. I'm gonna pop this in here and then we'll turn it down, but this should bring the temperature down a little bit as well. And this is gonna add a little bit of spice and heat as well to the soup, which is why, again, I didn't go too heavy on the red pepper or the cayenne pepper, because it can only take so much heat. But you can see it's just already thickening up from that flour in there. It's got a nice kind of thickness to it. Not overly thick, but still lovely. Okay. We're gonna let that simmer. I'm gonna wash my hands so we can make that nice orange glaze. Now, this will be a pretty simple glaze. We're just gonna use our juice from our little cuties here, the little clementines that we have, or mandarin oranges. And we will add a little bit of cream that gives just a little bit more richness to the base of our glaze, but it doesn't really impact the flavor. It just gives a thicker, it makes it a little bit thicker. So we're just gonna use all of this, because you're not gonna get too much out of each one. So just kind of squeeze them in here. You could also add a little bit of orange zest to the top, but I think I've got enough of this. This juice is a bit sweeter than regular oranges, but you can use a regular orange, or if you want to have fun, you could use a blood orange. It's going to give you a really cool color, but all that kind of flavors are about the same there. So you're looking at, you want around a tablespoon or so of the freshly squeezed orange juice. Wash my hands now that I've got it. I'm going to turn this down because we've got a good happening boil on it. And then I'm going to add a little bit of powdered sugar first and then my cream, simply because if I add my cream into that orange juice, the acidity of the orange juice will curdle the cream. So if I add the sugar first and then the cream, it will keep it nice and smooth. So we're going to just do a little bit of our sugar first, about a third cup of powdered sugar. Going to dissolve it in that kind of that orange juice here, that freshly squeezed cutie juice. And then I'm going to add in just a tablespoon of cream. It's going to just give a little bit of richness to the sauce.
You have a question? No sandwich today?
No sandwich today. I have to make some sourdough bread. I fed up my starter this morning and I've got it prepped, but I am completely out. We've just been away at my parents' house all Thanksgiving, so I wasn't really home making breads and stuff like that, or prepping up. You know, I fed it to keep my starter alive, but that was all pretty much. I did make a batch of blueberry muffins and I did make some sourdoughs last week, but we just were there and it just kind of took up all of our time. You know, when I only see my siblings all together like this, once a year at Thanksgiving time where we're all together. We see a lot of them in the summer when we go to my sister's lake house, but not all of us get together there. So it's very rare for all of us, and we're a large family, so it's kind of hard. But when we get together, the shenanigans we get into is always fun. Okay, I think we're pretty close on where we want this. You want it to be about the texture of glue, and that looks pretty good. And you see just that little bit of that cream adds a little bit of that richness to the glaze, adds a little bit of a base to it. Let's come over here and check our potatoes.
You have a question? Are you the baby of the family?
I am the baby of the family. So it's so funny. So I am the youngest of 10. I have 6 full siblings, and then I have 3 older ones on top of those 6 from my father's previous marriage. And of our niche, our 7, my oldest brother kind of turned 50 over the last week. So there's about a 13 age gap between us. But I am the baby, the best, the favorite. She stopped when she got to the best, you know. Save the best for last. Stop at perfection. I'm just gonna keep telling myself that. Perfect. Let me try a potato. Make sure they're nice and tender. Just about there. We'll add in our cream here in just a second, and then we will add in our cheese. While we wait, let's get our green onion sliced up, and then we're gonna drizzle our muffins. You just wanna let your muffins cool off just a little bit before you drizzle them, because if they're too hot, it's gonna slide right off. So I've got a couple green onions here. We're gonna throw some into our stew. I'll save a little bit to garnish. Same with the cheese. I'll save some of the cheese to garnish with. I'm gonna put the whiter ones in the stew because the brighter green ones are a little bit nicer for the garnish. They have a little less strong of an onion flavor to it. So I'll save this over here. We're gonna add in just a smidge of cream. You don't need a lot of cream to get you that richness. I'll probably use like 1/4 of a cup. I always find a little goes a long way to getting where you need to be. I think people think like those creamy soups, a lot of people just put way too much in there, and you don't need a lot to get that nice rich flavor. Okay, we'll let that kind of simmer together for a little bit, and then we'll add in our cheese. While we're doing that, let's see. I should be able to drizzle these. These aren't too hot. So just take it, and then we're gonna do our nice orange glaze to go over our cranberry orange muffins. We have that lovely, the zest from our clementines in here, and fresh cranberries, and then drizzled with the juice from our clementines in here just gives you another pop of orange in the muffin. Here we go. We'll let it ooze over. Beautiful. And that will just be a nice, like, sweet, tangy orange coating for the top of it, and it'll be just perfect. Okay, let's get our cheese mixed in here. I'm gonna again save a little bit for garnishing on the top. We're gonna mix in about a cup of cheddar cheese. We'll do just a little as we mix it, because we don't want to have any big chunks of cheese in here. And it should incorporate nicely into our broth for it, which we already used a little bit of flour to kind of thicken it up, but it's just going to be really lovely. Look at that. It is looking wonderful. And we're gonna add in our green onions now that that cheese is all melted in here. Add just a nice pop of fresh green. And a little burst of that fresh green onion flavor. Okay. And now we are about ready to serve up here. So I'm gonna turn this off, and let's get our plate, a bowl, and you get ready to serve it. We got our muffin. I'm gonna get a ladle. We do need a ladle. Slide this over here. Okay. For lunch today, we have our creamy potato and andouille sausage soup filled with carrots, celery, potatoes, red pepper, red bell peppers, green onions, thyme, cumin, cream, cheddar cheese, a little bit of red pepper. We're gonna top it with a little bit of cheddar cheese and our freshly chopped green onions. And then we will serve it with a nice top of our cranberry orange muffins with fresh cranberries and a fresh orange glaze on top, made with sourdough, but they're just the perfect little sweetness to this nice kind of rich soup. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of our recipes, you can just go to our page, search for what we made. So our creamy andouille and potato soup with our cranberry orange muffins, and you can always watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my knives, my cutting boards, my Dutch ovens, my bakeware, just all the different things I use in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.